6:00 a.m. Two men knock on my door like they're SWAT, plastic badges in hand, demanding $2,500 cash, or I go to jail. In my bathrobe, barely awake, I stare at them, knowing something's wrong. The fat one grins, his partner already pulling out handcuffs. "Pay up or you're done," he sneers. But here's what they don't know. I'm a former police chief, and I've dealt with scumbags like this before. The thing is, these guys aren't real cops. They're con artists running a scam, and today, I'm about to flip the script. But the real twist, what they don't realize is, I've been gathering evidence, and I'm about to drop a bombshell that'll shake their world to the core. I wasn't looking for a fight when I moved to Oakshire Meadows. After losing Sarah to cancer, I was done with city crime, politics, and the daily grind. 15 years as a police chief had left me burnt out, a shell of the man I used to be. I needed a fresh start, a place where I could grieve in peace, away from the noise and the chaos. So I packed up what was left of our life and bought a modest ranch house on Maple Street, nestled among 87 homes filled with working families and retirees. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. I could already picture it. Mornings with the smell of fresh roses from Sarah's memorial garden, afternoons spent in quiet reflection, maybe a BBQ on weekends with the neighbors. The perfect escape from the hell that had been my life for the past few years. And for a while it was. The first few weeks, I spent my time planting the roses Sarah always wanted but never had space for. She'd dreamed of a garden full of them in our old townhouse, but city living had never allowed it. So, I did it for her. I spent weekends making sure the flowers had the perfect sunlight, creating a place where I could still talk to her, even if she was no longer there. But then, the fence. It seemed like a simple upgrade, replacing the old, worn-out chain link with something nicer, more fitting for the space. A cedar privacy fence, sturdy and elegant, costing me $200. I thought it was a small price to pay for a dignified memorial. But I didn't know it would set off a chain of events that would turn my peaceful retirement into a nightmare. Enter Delilah Thornfield. She showed up one afternoon, strolling into my driveway like she owned the place, the sound of her stilettos clicking on the pavement. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything changed. Delilah wasn't just anyone. She was the president of the Oakshire Meadows Homeowners Association, the HOA. She was also a nightmare wrapped in a designer blazer, armed with a thick folder and a smile that made my skin crawl. "Welcome to our little community," she purred, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm Delilah. We need to talk about your unauthorized construction project." She waved the folder at me like a threat. I barely had a chance to say anything before she was already flipping through pages of HOA regulations. 47 pages of rules, she muttered, almost to herself. Paint colors, mailbox heights, holiday decorations, you name it, we control it. I didn't need her to explain further. I'd seen people like her before, people who thought they had the power to control everything and everyone around them. But here's the kicker. I'd done everything by the book. I'd filed all the necessary paperwork, gotten written approval from the previous board member. Hell, I had everything in order, or so I thought. But Delilah didn't care. She didn't care about my paperwork. "Sweetie, these approvals died with the old board. New leadership, new standards." She smiled again, a shark's grin. "That fence, it's a violation of Section 12B, aesthetic disruption. You have 72 hours to remove it, or face escalating financial penalties." I couldn't believe it. I'd been here for a month, and already I was in her crosshairs. But I wasn't just going to roll over. Not this time. Not after everything I'd been through. No, this wasn't just about a fence. It was about power, and who got to wield it. That evening, my neighbor Marcus stopped by, beer in hand, and a grim expression on his face. "You've just painted a target on your back," he said, taking a seat at my kitchen table. He wasn't wrong. He knew exactly what Delilah and her crew were capable of. He'd seen it happen before. Marcus explained the real truth behind Oakshire Meadows. Delilah's HOA wasn't about community. It was about money, lots of it. And if you didn't pay up, you were out of luck. Mrs. Patterson, a sweet old woman who lived next door, had already forked out $8,000 in fines just to keep Delilah off her back. The Korean family down the street had been hit with violations for having traditional garden decorations. A single mom had been fined for not storing her kids' toys properly. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about extorting the vulnerable. And I wasn't about to let them get away with it. 3 days after Delilah's visit, the first official violation notice arrived. $500 for my unauthorized fence. It wasn't just about the money. It was the tone, the arrogance of it. Delilah wasn't just some neighbor trying to keep the community looking nice. She was a predator, and I was her next target. That morning, I walked out to find Vernon Ellis, her right-hand man, waiting on my front porch. He was the kind of guy who looked like he couldn't finish a sentence without screwing it up. But today, he was playing the part of enforcer. He had his clipboard, his fake authority, and the same swagger he used to bully anyone who didn't have the guts to stand up to him. He was measuring my fence, shaking his tape measure like it was a weapon. "Mr. Wolf," he sneered, "your fence doesn't just violate Section 12B. It disrupts sightlines, property values, and community harmony. You need to take it down, immediately." I kept my cool. "We've been through this. I have written approval from the old board. This isn't about a fence. This is about you flexing your power." Delilah was lurking behind him, arms crossed, enjoying the show like she was watching an execution. "We're just following the rules," she said, with a smile so fake it could have melted off her face. But it wasn't just about enforcing rules. This was about control, about her need to break people down and make them beg for mercy. But I wasn't going to beg. Not this time. "Your rules are a joke," I said. "This is harassment." That night I went to work. I wasn't just going to sit back and take it. As a former cop, I knew how to investigate. So I started digging. I pulled up public records, county filings, the HOA's tax status, and their registration. Everything I found confirmed what I already suspected. Delilah's HOA wasn't even legally registered as a nonprofit. It was a sham. I spent hours tracking down documents, cross-referencing names, and following the money. And what I found made my blood run cold. The HOA didn't even file annual reports. There were no public records, no audits, nothing. The place was a ghost town of transparency, all smoke and mirrors. And the deeper I dug, the more I found. Delilah had been funneling payments to Vernon's maintenance company for jobs that never happened. Thousands of dollars were going into her personal account. This wasn't a neighborhood HOA. It was a criminal operation disguised as community service. I wasn't the only one who had noticed. That evening, Marcus showed up with more bad news. He brought me a file, a stack of papers filled with horror stories from my neighbors. Mrs. Patterson's records, thick with violation notices, fines, and threats. The Martinez family, who had been harassed for months for cultural displays in their yard. A single mom named Sarah, whose kids' toys had been deemed a safety violation. And all of it, every single fine, every visit, every threat, had one thing in common: Delilah's signature. "She's playing a game," Marcus said, pouring himself a beer. "A long con. She goes after the ones she knows can't fight back. Elderly folks, immigrants, single parents, people who won't stand up for themselves. But you've got the skills to bring her down." I felt something change inside me. Maybe I hadn't been ready for a fight, but now I was. This wasn't just about a fence. This was about protecting people who had been too scared to say anything. I wasn't going to let Delilah get away with it. Not on my watch. The next day, Delilah came back with her latest violation notice. $500 for the fence, plus a $50 a day penalty for every day it stayed up. And this time, she brought Vernon along to measure again, like some kind of twisted inspection team. "You've got 72 hours to comply," she said with a smirk, "or we'll start seizing your property." I stared at her, feeling the old fire I hadn't felt in years. "You've got 72 hours to stop wasting my time. After that, I'm bringing the heat." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I got to work. I started collecting everything: photos of the violations, emails, text messages, financial records. I even started recording her visits, capturing every word. I wasn't just building a case. I was building a time bomb. By the end of the week, I had enough to bury her. It wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about exposing her for what she was, a criminal using her HOA position to extort families. I knew I had the goods to take her down. The next day, Delilah and Vernon showed up at my door again. But this time, I wasn't just going to back down. This time, I had something even better than legal documents. I had the truth, and that was going to be their downfall. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when everything came to a head. Delilah and Vernon showed up at my door like usual, but this time, they didn't have their usual cocky swagger. Vernon was wearing a building inspector badge, an obvious knockoff from a costume shop, and Delilah was clutching a stack of papers, ready to demand her latest round of extortion. But I wasn't scared this time. I was ready. "Mr. Wolf, you've ignored the HOA's orders for far too long," Delilah said with that same patronizing smile. "If you don't take down this fence, we'll escalate the fines. And trust me, it won't be pretty." "Delilah," I said, standing firm in my doorway, "I don't think you understand the situation. I've got enough evidence here to bury you. This isn't about a fence anymore. This is about criminal activity." Vernon stepped forward, trying to be the tough guy, but the shaky hand holding the fake badge made him look more like a scared kid playing dress-up. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Wolf. We've got the law on our side." I took a slow breath, keeping my cool. "You've been running a scam. This HOA isn't even legally registered. The fines, the threats, the so-called inspections, it's all illegal. I've been documenting everything, and soon so will the authorities." Delilah's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "You're bluffing. You think anyone will believe you over us?" I didn't have to say anything, because at that exact moment, the first of 3 unmarked SUVs pulled up, then another, and finally the third. Federal agents in tactical gear poured out, and Delilah's face drained of color. She started to sputter, but the words wouldn't come. Vernon tried to back away, but a federal agent grabbed him by the shoulder, spinning him around. "Vernon Ellis, you're under arrest for fraud, mail fraud, impersonating a law enforcement officer, and more." Delilah tried to take control, her voice rising in panic. "You can't do this! You have no idea who I am! The federal agent cut her off. "Delilah Thornfield, you are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, extortion, and a laundry list of other charges. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." It was over, just like that. Delilah and Vernon were in cuffs, and the world that had been terrorized by their fake authority crumbled in an instant. But there was no victory yet. Not for me. Not for anyone who had suffered under their reign. I stepped back, letting the agents do their work. The neighbors began to emerge one by one, stepping out of their homes to witness the moment that would change Oakshire Meadows forever. Miss Patterson, Sarah, Marcus, and the rest, people who had been beaten down by this scam, were now witnesses to their tormentors being taken away in real handcuffs. But the real beauty of this moment wasn't just the arrests. It was seeing Delilah's facade shatter. Her polished, fake world was crumbling, and it was a sight I couldn't help but savor. She had thought she could control all of us, that her threats would make us cower in fear. But she had underestimated one thing: the strength of a community when it finally decided to stand up. As the agents read Delilah and Vernon their rights, I stood in the background watching. The smell of the fresh morning air, mixed with the faint scent of my memorial garden behind me, was oddly comforting. Sarah's roses were still there, still thriving, despite everything they had tried to destroy. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment the truth finally won. But there was more to come. As the agents loaded Delilah and Vernon into the back of the SUVs, I could hear the whispers of the neighbors. They were talking about the future, about how this wasn't just about the fines anymore. It was about taking back control, about making sure this never happened again. But we weren't done yet. The arrests of Delilah and Vernon sent shockwaves through Oakshire Meadows. The fear that had gripped our community for months was gone, replaced by a sense of hope and relief. The power that Delilah had wielded so effortlessly was shattered, and the neighborhood was finally free. But the work didn't stop there. In the weeks that followed, the FBI dug deeper into Delilah's operation. It turned out that this wasn't just a local scam. Delilah had run similar schemes in other counties, using fake fines and harassment to extort families. The evidence uncovered was overwhelming: fake invoices, forged signatures, and the illegal funneling of money to her personal accounts. She wasn't just a bully, she was a criminal, and now she was facing serious charges. But the real victory was how the community responded. For months we had been terrorized by Delilah's power trip, but now we were taking it back. The federal investigation made national news, and soon the story of Oakshire Meadows became a symbol of what happens when good people stand up against corruption. A documentary crew, led by investigative journalist Dmitry Vulov, arrived to cover the story. The documentary, The HOA Tyrants: How One Neighborhood Fought Back, aired on national TV and sparked a nationwide conversation about HOA abuse. Residents who had once lived in fear now stood proud, telling their stories of how Delilah's exploitation had nearly ruined their lives. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who had been too terrified to speak up, was now sharing her experience of how Delilah's constant threats had affected her. Sarah, the single mom, spoke about the fines her family had endured just for trying to make ends meet. As the story spread, Oakshire Meadows became a model for communities nationwide. Inspired by our collective stand, other neighborhoods began to organize and fight back against similar abuses. But back home, we weren't just celebrating the end of a criminal operation. We were building something new. We held a special election for a new HOA president, and the turnout was overwhelming. 89% of residents voted, and Marcus, my good friend and a staunch ally throughout this ordeal, was elected president. Under his leadership, the HOA became a force for good, with transparent rules, fair fines, and a commitment to serving the people. No more arbitrary power trips. No more extortion. The new HOA bylaws were simple but effective. Fines were capped at $25, and any major decisions required community approval. Every financial transaction was made public, and residents could see exactly where their money was going. It wasn't just about stopping the abuse. It was about making sure it never happened again. Mrs. Patterson, whose husband Harold had spent his final years documenting Delilah's crimes, became the community historian. Harold's meticulous notes on the HOA's corruption were now a treasure trove of evidence that would protect us from future exploitation. His work and his death were not in vain. Thanks to him, we were able to hold Delilah accountable and rebuild the community. We also established the Harold Patterson Community Protection Fund, a $50,000 endowment to provide legal support to families facing HOA abuse. The fund helped families in other neighborhoods avoid the same traps we had fallen into. It was a legacy of justice, and it helped turn the tide against HOA corruption across the region. The real reward came when Oakshire Meadows started to heal. The memorial garden I'd built for Sarah became a symbol of the strength of the community. The roses bloomed, and families began gathering in the park for barbecues, picnics, and evenings spent together, no longer afraid of what the HOA might do next. In the months that followed, Oakshire Meadows transformed. What had once been a place of fear and intimidation was now a thriving, empowered community. The new HOA, led by Marcus, made sure that every resident felt heard and respected. Delilah's criminal empire had crumbled, and in its place, a strong and united community had emerged. As for Delilah and Vernon, their downfall was swift and complete. They were sentenced to prison for their roles in the racketeering operation. Delilah received 22 years for her part in the scheme, while Vernon got 15. They would spend the rest of their lives paying for their crimes, and they would never again have the power to terrorize innocent people. 3 months after the arrests, Oakshire Meadows was a different place. The smell of barbecue smoke replaced the scent of fear. The neighborhood, once a place of quiet desperation, had turned into a vibrant community where people stood together, united by the fight for justice. And as I stood there in front of Sarah's roses, watching families come together, I realized that sometimes the best way to honor the dead is by protecting the living. Harold's records had helped us expose the truth. Sarah's memory had inspired the healing. Together, the community had fought back and won.